people go out and say, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be my own boss, I want to be, etc., I think they're in there for all the wrong reasons. What has happened to me, and I think the people that have been most successful, is I'm obsessed with an idea, and the only way I can pursue it is through entrepreneurship.
I think there's value to believing in your own taste, and I think that if you believe in your own taste, and hopefully it's good taste, and then the rest will follow. You have to think about the audience of people who think like you.
Do you believe that AI in filmmaking can kind of serve as a creative tool or as an extension for artists? All right, we're back for episode 2, Cassette Podcast. First episode that we have a featured special guest, and we're so excited to have you, Mark Rapaport, on to have a little bit of a discussion, talk film, talk audio, and just, your whole journey. So I think if you want to start us off with a little bit of, the type of stuff you've been doing, where you come from, all of that, I think we'd appreciate that.
Totally. Well, thank you, Aiden, and thank you, Alex, for having me on. I think, what you're building is super cool. And when I heard about that from Alex, my old college friend and fellow pledge mate, actually my pledge, technically my little, even though I feel like we're the same age somehow.
We did meet in a frat basement, which is
In a frat basement. So, no, all that is to say is, no, thank you both for having me on, and it's super cool you guys are doing and how it relates to film and storytelling, really, I'd say overall is the common thread here that we both share a passion for. And so, yeah, for me, my path into it is less tech and coding. I have no such skills in that regard. I'm a writer first, and I'm a filmmaker, director overall. I'd say that's what I am, and that's what I'm working towards, a career as a filmmaker. And I recently shot my first feature film as a director. But prior to that, I had produced 4 other feature films all in the indie low budget space. So I'd say that's sort of my wheelhouse, is making a movie for little resources, but having the quality remain high. And I've had that chance to be an executive producer on a couple bigger movies, and that's always fun. But it's like a different game, and it's like I don't know that I like that game, to be honest. Like, unless I'm the one getting the budget for my directing, it's like, wait a second, why does this project need all this money to shoot? I don't know. So, but God bless if people could raise that much. But yeah, that's where I'm at. My first film shot at my grandmother's house, so it's a real it's
I
a
did not know that.
yeah, yeah. That's it's a fun fact about it, and just that kind of attitude of sort of, and I think that's what I have in common with like the startup. To find again common ground there with storytelling is also I've always approached it like an entrepreneur, like a startup. Every film sort of in that way, sort of like how can we do a lot with a little, and it's sort of against all odds. So I've always looked up to entrepreneurs as well, probably even more so than some filmmakers. I try to blend those two minds.
So I want to double click for a second here because, as you know, I listened to Hippo for the first time. I assume you're talking about Hippo at your grandma's house, just last week, and so I only watched the first 5 minutes. It gave me a sense of what the visual setting was, the black and white, everything. But I listened to the rest. It is very, very funny to think about all the scenes that happen in that movie occurring in your grandma's house now. I think that's really, really good and important context here, given the content of that film being like a childhood space filming that.
It's funny, like, and I'm glad now. I'm glad I didn't tell you before watching because it probably would have like it's probably all you would have thought about. It was, to be honest, like I used it so much in the authenticity of the story. Like my grandmother really did have like a Cold War era bomb shelter. Like every room in that house was like sort of looking like what it looked like with the crosses on the wall. My grandmother's Catholic. So it's like we sort of used all of these elements of the weirdness of like her quirky little suburban home into the story. And so it was strange, but it was really cathartic to be able to use that. And it didn't feel strange because I was able to like use it towards something I also loved, which was the movie. So I got to draw on this great place with a lot of great memories and then use those to make more great memories for the characters and for the film. and try to bring out the humor that maybe my brothers and I had while visiting their house, and just sort of like have fun with it while also probably creating something completely fictional, hopefully, right? Because it's a little messed up, the
I
movie.
hope that
So,
was a fictional piece. I
yeah.
really, really hope that was a fictional.
Mark, I'm curious if there's anything that you see a lot of indie filmmakers or filmmakers who are earlier in their career, anything that they may be doing wrong, and that you, as somebody with a bit more experience in this space, and indie filmmaking a lot of the time serves for young filmmakers as a means to try to um, like tap in and make a name for themselves in the industry, and then go into try to go into Hollywood and all of this other stuff. I'm wondering if there's an approach that you see a lot of young filmmakers doing that you think that could be resolved, or there's an easier way to go about.
It's a really great question, and it's taken me probably about 10, whatever, 12 years to finally realize the right way. And I was halfway there. I've been halfway on it. And I would say I'll start with the right way. The right way is blind belief in yourself and using digital tools and the internet to spread your your brand, your name. If you're a filmmaker, it's your name. If you're an actor, it's also your name, but there's a brand to everyone's name in the entertainment industry. What I've done well is the first part in believing in myself blindly. I've spent years living at my mom's house. Like I've gotten every cheap rent deal I could ever get.
You were a
Like,
nanny for a couple of years, right? Weren't you doing this?
yeah, I was a nanny, a male nanny. They called it a manny. It was a good gig. You do have to break in and believe in yourself and don't give up. You don't need the six-figure salary right out of college. If that's what you want, and that leads into the wrong way to do it, if you approach filmmaking as a traditional career path, and when I say filmmaking, I mean being the actor, the producer, the director, not the guy holding the light. That is more traditional. That is something you do need to get experience on just on sets. But if you're trying to make it a name for yourself, yeah, you got to say goodbye to that six-figure salary out of college and the comfort of that, and you have to say hello to uncertainty for several years and embrace that and be like, you know what, if I have to live at my mom's house, my grandma's house, my girlfriend's house, like whatever it is, like um, I'm gonna put everything I have into it, energy wise and money wise, and then something will happen eventually because you love it so much and it'll work out. And that's where I'm at, where finally 10 years later, I mean, the last few years has been working out, but that first 8 years was definitely like not turning a dollar on any of this. Even if my movies were getting on to Netflix and Hulu, we were maybe breaking even, so it looks great. But again, a problem with the industry is that the indie films that sell to these outlets often sell for less than their budgets. And when you're the producer on them, you're probably not taking a huge fee because you're sort of vouching for all this and you're putting your money into it. And so I'd sort of end up in these situations of just like selling a $200,000 movie for like $200,000 and having no, but I didn't get any of that $200,000. But it's like, oh, but I'm remembering the bigger goal here. It's like to learn to do it. And then in my case, it was to transition to being a director more than a producer. Turns out I was better at that. And so now I'm finally, at that sort of path where I'm starting to see the fruits of my labor. But yeah, all there is to say is like, if you want to do that, don't worry about getting the job or the steady paycheck. Like, sure, PA on a set or two here and there, see what it looks like, a bigger set. I did that. But like, if you want to be the director, I wouldn't recommend being the PA for like 10 years. Like, you might get upgraded to being like the key PA or like the assistant director, but that's a totally different job. And some people do that. Like, you can make it in the traditional route, but I think that that's farther and fewer between now. Like, I think that's really tough unless your uncle is like the head of a studio. Like, it's better to believe in yourself and use YouTube, use Instagram, and that's the part I'm doing now is trying to build a YouTube channel and to keep that side going.
I was just gonna say, I'm curious what the contracts and the industry side looks like for when you're in a meeting with Netflix or Hulu or HBO, because I think there's a lot of people out there who may naively be like, "Oh, I secured a contract to sell my movie to Netflix, like I must be set now as a director, as an actor." What's sort of the truth behind that?
So the truth behind that is if you are one of the few films of the year, if it truly is 10, maybe 20 films in a year that premiere at Sundance, Toronto, Cannes, Venice, and get that Netflix deal out of the festival for 10, $20 million, a worldwide deal. You have movies like the Apple one with the deaf family that won all those awards. Coda, yeah, great film. This past year at Netflix, there was a horror movie. Sorry. This past year at Sundance, there was a horror movie that sold to Netflix for like 15 million. That the director was probably 10 years older than me and had been trying to make it, and he did. And he sold it for 15 million, and he is now sort of set a little bit. Like he probably made out with a couple $1 million. So that does happen, and I'm not saying like it doesn't happen. It does. It's very rare, especially if you're making a smaller movie with no big names, and if it's not a traditional horror movie and it doesn't fit in like a very clear marketable niche, like for example the YouTubers, the brothers, the Raka brothers or whatever their name. I'm sorry, they sold Talk to Me out of Sundance. So again, it does happen, and my hats off to those people, and I hope one of my future films does achieve said monetary value. When you see a film on Netflix or HBO, the sad truth of it is that most of the time it's a secondary deal. And so what'll happen is you'll sell your much smaller film that maybe didn't sell for 10 million, you'll sell it for a couple 100,000 and to a distributor who has an output deal with a Netflix, a Hulu, or an HBO, and it'll get on Netflix, Hulu, or HBO. That's what happened to me 3 times with these other ones. And everyone will say, "Oh, your movie's on Netflix. You must be a millionaire." It's like and it's like, yeah, honestly, we should be if Netflix bypassed the middleman and just bought it from us. But it doesn't work that way, sadly. There are a lot of these output deals, and they package them together. And they have, I think it's literally sometimes it'll be like a minimum spend. If you're a distributor, a small distributor, you might have a deal with Netflix where they have to buy like $5 million of your movies every year or something, or $1 million. And so yeah, you package them and sell them. But that's where distribution can be a dicey business, and also why I decided to self-release Hippo, which is why I have the rights to it, which is why I'm able to let it be on cassette, because
Super excited for that.
yeah, so because most distributors would be like, "What are you talking about?" They don't like new things, probably. I mean, I hope for your sake that you can convince them all to get their movies on cassette. But yeah.
You know, draw a parallel here between filmmaking and building companies because I feel like there are so many things that are really there's a lot of connective tissue here, and it's obvious to me, having known you since you were a teenager, that you are obsessed with making movies. Like it is a love, a passion. There's nothing else in your life as important to you, maybe family and and that, but beyond that, personal interest that beyond filmmaking. And I think a lot of people look at company building or maybe filmmaking or acting or similar as a way to get rich, as a way to make a lot of money. And the reality is that the outcome is usually not that great for most people, right? People see these billion-dollar tech exits, but don't realize that one in 1,000 companies get there and the other 999 don't, right? So if you really chop that down to expected value, you're spending 7, 8 years of your life grinding on something that has a less than 1% chance of working out. You might as well have gotten a job at Google. The same way you might as well have gotten a job, as a PA or something else, much more on the track salaried. And so to anyone out there who is thinking of building their own thing, whether it's a movie or a company or becoming an actor, a personal brand can be a thing you're building. I think it's so important that you have to love what you're doing and be obsessed with what you're doing because the money may not come and you need to just appreciate that you spent your time well no matter what. And I find those people tend to put the highest energy in, the kind of put the most time in, go the extra mile to make these things work. I have a great mentor who once said, he's an investor and he says, if someone shows up 1% more than their competition, but you compound that over the course of a year, 10 years, etc., the difference is just vast. And so if you are taking a salary job and saying, oh, I'll do it at night or oh, I'll do it this way, it becomes much harder. I recognize not everyone has the privilege to go off and do everything, with full freedom, right? Everyone has different life situations. But I think to the extent that you can take those risks in yourself, people have to. Obviously, you have, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a perfect parallel, honestly. And everything from starting the LLC, then, every film needs its own LLC, every company needs a structure. So, and like you said, the passion, that really resonates with me. I think that's spot on. Like, you have to love it. And because if you love it, the last 10 years of my life, I don't remember the bad grindy nights. I remember the successes, the getting into the film festival, screening in New York, LA. You remember the wins because you love it. And like you said, then I think it will eventually pay off. And it's also like, why? There's only one way to find out. You live once, and it's like, yeah, I could have racked up $500,000 in savings from being a PA in the last decade and working overtime. And oh my God, Netflix, HBO, these companies to work on a TV show, you can get paid like with very little like actual work. You're getting paid hundreds, if not 500 or 1,000 a day sometimes if they go overtime. I mean, I have friends who are like self-made millionaires from being like a props guy for like Netflix shows. And
Yeah.
it's like the best of the blue collar jobs, and they have unions, and it's great. But yeah, you're probably not gonna win the Palme d'Or or make $100 million box office hit.
Or
It
feel
just
that thing, right? That thing
Yeah,
that I created this, that pursuit of your own passion, your own thing, right? I think that's
right.
just a
Even if you
very much,
don't make the
yeah.
$100 million hit, you win the local film festival in Pennsylvania, like I've done with Hippo. It's very cathartic, yeah, and it's something you have to do. And as I talked about in my first YouTube video on my channel that I launched, it's like I feel like I had to be a filmmaker. Do you feel like that? Like you had no choice. It's almost like you wish you didn't have this disease because life could be a lot simpler. It's like a
Yes,
disease.
it's like breathing. You wake up, you go to sleep thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it, and when you spend any time elsewhere, you're like, what am I doing? And I feel like that's been the case with the companies that I've built, right? The technology I've built. It's like I feel this like deep magnetism for it. So I totally get it.
Yeah. I think I kind of think of entrepreneurship as a drug almost, in that I I never really had a traditional job out of college necessarily, but it kind of flipped a switch in my mind in a way that I'm sure it has for both of you as well, where you're kind of like, okay, now that I have a taste of what this is and I really like to do it, I really can't go back to the way that it's operate. And it ends up not even
Yeah,
mattering.
normal folks,
Yeah,
normal
yeah,
folks.
Well,
I
this
guess like, but like the way that I think about it is like you get a glimpse of that world and you start to realize, oh, I can have complete ownership over this creative process or this product or something that helps people, and you can really never stop after that point.
Yeah.
I was gonna say there's this thing I talk to early founders again, background tech. So I'm usually talking about companies, but I think it applies here for creative, especially in filmmaking. Is no one should want to be an entrepreneur, right? When people go out and say, "I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be my own boss, I want to be, etc." I think they're in there for all the wrong reasons. What has happened to me, and I think the people that have been most successful, is I'm obsessed with an idea. And the only way I can pursue it is through entrepreneurship. So it's passion for
Right.
movies, it's passion for technology. That the only way you can both support yourself but also scale out what you're trying to do to get to larger audiences, whether they be users or viewers, is by pursuing it in the capitalistic, environment that we're in through entrepreneurship. So I really, advise anyone, don't have the goal of being an entrepreneur, have the goal of building something you personally care deeply about, and the only way to do it is through, making that thing your own.
I love
Yeah.
that. And one of the things we were talking about, Aiden, over email was like, um, how do you know when like you have to do it? And it was my first short film. I was dealing with my parents, like they're having a divorce and whatever. Like any Noah Baumbach film, there's some drama. It's funny. It's scary. It's messed up. And I didn't know what to do with those feelings, but I would always keep thinking about making a movie about it. And it's like it's building up in me. And as I was producing movies, I was like, why am I producing other people's stories? Like I finally have something I need to say. And then that was it for me, is that need to say it. Like I couldn't even I couldn't sit anywhere in a normal job or have a normal conversation. I think I had job interviews where I would like actively scare people off. I'd probably say something like about my parents' divorce, or just, I'm realizing like I can't interact right now with the normal world. I have to go make the movie. And so yeah, like you said, like whether it's turns out movies and writing is just what I'm good at and drawn to. But if I was a painter, I wish I knew how to paint. I'd probably do that more. I'd probably like paint a lot, but I don't know how to paint.
I was about to mention the same thing because people talk all the time about how we as people, if we want to go into a creative field or an entrepreneurial field, that we have the time. There's like many successful actors that didn't break out until they were 60 plus years old. But I think what's more interesting in those stories is when it comes to directors. because there's been like multiple directors who I know of who didn't create their first movie until they were, 40, 50, 60 years old. They didn't do it when they were like 23 and youthful and excited and all this stuff. But it was because they did not have the story to tell until they reached that age and something clicked at that point. And I found that to be so profound and important because filmmaking, I also feel like, especially on the West Coast in Hollywood, is such a romanticized career field in a similar way that the internet romanticizes entrepreneurship. But you really look at some of the major success stories that inspire a lot of the younger generation of filmmakers, and those people all kind of waited their turn until it was unbearable that the story was still within them and that they couldn't get it out. And so I think you kind of nailed it with that as well. And I think it just like goes to show for people listening is that yes, you do have time, but you also need to make sure that like the story you want to tell, the things that you want to help people do, or the idea that you have, that drives the work that you want to do and the decisions that you make.
Yeah, and you have to live your life, and stuff will come from that. Yeah, I didn't have my story to tell until I was like 28. And then it was like finally like, okay, I actually have something to tell. That's not just I call them puzzle piece movies when like a Marvel movie. Like one could write a movie that's just a puzzle piece. Like it's an exercise. It's an intellectual exercise. No one's feeling anything. It's just fun. Maybe you're feeling moments, but to me that's not like the kind of movies I want to make. I want to make movies that are like I have to do it. And so I just I shot my second one, and luckily I internalized the world a lot and need to do this expensive therapy of filmmaking. But also I want to say I'm lucky in that like if this was 30 years ago, we're lucky as like the digital, the digital technologies that are available now with filmmaking. Like even if I wanted to make this movie when I was 28, but I lived in 1980s or 90s, it would be too expensive. I wouldn't. I'd have because you have to shoot on film, all those problems. So I do recognize I'm very lucky in that it's relatively cheaper to make a movie. It's still not. It's not zero. I think we're gonna get to that point. By the way, that like I think AI will mean like you don't need to light a scene. You don't need to even record on good audio. Like I think we'll get to the point where there's literally like no excuse but to just shoot it. But we're not there yet. It's still, I think, at least a couple $100,000 to make something quality.
Mark, do you believe that AI in filmmaking can kind of serve as a creative tool or as an extension for artists, or do you think it's might have a net negative on the industry?
It's a really good question, and I think about it a lot. I come up against it a lot, and I'll tell you the places where I love AI are when it's a tool to make something better that you've already done. So if I have a color grade on my YouTube video, I can use AI to match the grade across the whole thing without having to be painstakingly knowing how to color grade. If I screwed up a bit of audio, I can clean it up with AI. Maybe there's some VFX AI stuff. There is upscaling for like, I shot some thermal footage for my new movie. And I think we're going to use Topaz. We've already tested it and it looks a lot better. And so like, I wouldn't use upscaling just like for the sake of it to make my movie extra crispy, but it's like for a thermal image that's really grainy, it's like a perfect use because it's not meant to be real life anyway. I do think there's uses. That said, I also think that there's bastardization of the art going on, and I think that you have to be careful not to be like, oh, I'm gonna enter AI to like shoot a whole live action commercial with like a guy who looks like Brad Pitt and then put it on, something, and he has like 17 fingers, and it looks all mish kebab, or it's clearly referencing like something that should be copywritten, right? Like the Studio Ghibli stuff. I love that. But like, what if you made a YouTube channel making cartoons in that style, but all you did was just, I mean, Miyazaki would probably sue you. And like, so we're like reaching that point where it's like, I think internally as a company, if I am Studio Ghibli, see now I'd say, okay, you can use AI to speed up your process. And so just be careful. Or Disney, oh, I can make a Mickey Mouse cartoon faster now. But I think if I were to use it, it would be ripping off like a David Fincher movie if I just had to do a whole shot. It would be learning off other filmmakers. I don't want that. But if it could learn off of my film and I could show if I could input the footage I did or the ADR voice that I did, and it can give me something that works. Okay, now we're talking about, because now it's like, call it AI, but people have been using those tricks forever. I mean, my sound designer will edit together two voices to make it sound like one. Like, no one needs to know how you get there. So
Yeah.
I'm both fervently against it in some respect, but I'm also really excited about what it can do.
I'm
Yeah.
For
hearing
people who, yeah,
I'm hearing extension of self is where you really see AI as valuable and impactful, and as the core creative asset. You're saying no, that's kind of anti-art in a sense, right? What we're looking for is I only have 10 fingers and 24 hours in a day. AI can help me make higher quality things faster that I was already going to make. It's going to be a
in
time
my
saver.
style, in
Right,
your
it's
style.
exactly an extension of myself. If I was to say, you know what, I love the look of, early days, Steamboat Willie, and I want to just create as many cartoons as I can by hitting a button, that's not art anymore. We've kind of gone beyond that. And that's your position. That's what your take on it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good way to put it. And with writing, it's the most ambiguous because people will churn out scripts, I think, in Hollywood with this. And it's obviously learning from like hundreds of writers. So it's like, wait a second, like, you can't just do that. But if you can input, like, here's 100 scripts I wrote, or maybe I licensed my script to the machine. Okay, now that's fair. Like, I've given this machine permission to learn from my script.
Can I ask a controversial question here?
Yeah.
Aren't you the combination of all things you've learned from other people? Like, if you go to film school or any sort of school, you are learning off of the work of other people. And frankly, when I, if I went to film school and I watched a movie, I'm not paying that personal royalty on my future work for having that knowledge. So what is different
Right.
about a computer leveraging, of what makes other content good versus you leveraging your understanding? Like, we have Citizen Kane and those original kind of shots that modernize film. Should it be that you, Mark, should not be allowed to use those shots because you're copying them from that creative exploration that was done nearly 100 years ago, maybe more than 100 years ago at this point?
I think that's a really great question. And I forget when it crossed my mind once, but no one's really asked me that point blank. And I think that the difference is that there's a human element, and I do believe that there's a God. Like, I do believe that there's some level of creation and feeling that a machine can't have. But no, on its surface, logically, you make a good point. It is, if you remove that, the spirit, which is sort of funny enough, the topic of my new movie is about the Holy Trinity. But if you remove the spirit from the body and just think of the brain as a computer, it is a one-to-one. But you know, people say my movie reminds them of Yorgos Lanthimos or Wes Anderson. Of course, watch those filmmakers. It's not a mistake that it reminds them of that. I've both referenced them while also making it my own. But I think that's one of the keys is I can make it my own to create something I'm told is different when you blend the ingredients. If AI is able to create something of its own and actually have a feeling and a voice, then I would say that is very impressive. And that's not currently the AI is not doing that. I'm not seeing it do that. But no, if an AI can, if you say making a movie in the style of Citizen Kane meets Marvel and it spits out like, some beautiful black and white superhero movie that's like perfect, I would say yeah, whoever, like, I would say the AI, whoever owns that AI should be able to profit off of that as long as they license those parts is the thing. Right
Understood.
now, if you're not licensing like Citizen Kane or the Marvel movie, you can't make money off of that. They'll sue you. Like, so I do think that there's something to that, and I'm not gonna say it's not entertainment. It is, I think AI will drive entertainment, but I'm gonna make the distinction between for now, for the sake of not speaking on it for hours. I think for me, if I make the distinction between entertainment and art, call it
Mm.
art, then I would say I don't think AI can do that yet. And luckily, I don't have to blow my brains out just yet because a computer can't replace that yet.
I think my principle it goes along with that. It's that if you're using AI as a creative to make decisions, I think that's where you've kind of lost the sense of art and your sense of direction. And what I mean by that is, Like, I believe that AI can be like a really valuable tool in creating art, but if you're relying on the AI to have the sense of direction that you should as an artist, like that's kind of the core piece of it. So
Mm.
I think it goes along with what you were saying.
Oh, that's very cool. And I wonder, like, yeah, like I wonder who's going to be the first like director to like man the quantum computer and be like, you're directing it, like co-directed by like James Cameron and like a server farm.
I have, so in entrepreneurship in particular, one of the core principles is to be audience first, to be user first, to really understand your audience more than yourself almost. And that's a pretty kind of controversial topic when it comes to making art versus, like art versus, let's say in the 21st century, art versus content or art versus entertainment. How do you think about those two things? How do you think about approaching your audience and understanding what your audience looks like? Or for you, is filmmaking purely art first, what you want to see put out into?
So I did make a pretty strong point on this once when I guest wrote an article for a website called No Film School, um, after Hippo came out, and I called the title of the article or the subtitle. It said "Make your movie for an audience of one, yourself." And I still stand by that as an artist and filmmaker, which is to say, you have to love it, and 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 the rest will follow. The example I give in that article is like there's a video online of like a guy who feeds raccoons like hot dogs, and it goes viral, and it's so weird. And as a director, I might have, yeah, it's like bizarre, but it has millions of views. It's this old, like homeless looking guy, like throwing hot dogs, like a big bucket of them. And when I discovered that, I was like, this is the best thing ever. I know it. I know it to be true. I didn't have to see the views and comments. And then you check the views and comments, and it's like, okay, I'm not the only psychopath on the internet. Or you might discover a video, you might be the first one. Like, you ever subscribe to like a YouTube channel and they're like before they have like 1,000 subscribers, and you're like, this is it. I know this is it. And then you check back and they have 1 million subscribers. So I think there's value to believing in your own taste. And I think that if you believe in your own taste and hopefully it's good taste, and then the rest will follow. And so yeah, the audience matters, but it's like don't worry too much about the audience because you might end up worrying about the wrong audience. You have to think about the audience of people who think like you. And if you're like completely mentally unwell and your ideas are insane, well then you probably won't be tasked with a big budget anyway. So you might as well just make your crazy little book or movie like or like keep it under your bed like on that like I don't know, was it Joan Didion or just like they probably didn't know they were gonna make books for generations um of young women who idolize her. Like I think it was I hope it's Joan Didion. I don't know if I'm thinking of the right one. But like but uh but it happened because they and yeah, life's too short to not believe in yourself. Yeah, bottom line. But so all this to say is like, yeah, if a Marvel executive listens to this movie, they're like, we are not hiring that guy. He does not listen to the audience. But also, I think like even in entrepreneurship, and correct me if I'm wrong, like even with cassette, it's like you have the hunch first, where it's like I think this would be really good, right? Like it worked. Like you found out that listening to movies was like right, and then you later polled the audience, and it turns out people agree with you. So I don't know. I like to think I'm not completely on my own on that.
And I think it comes down to what the goals are as well, right? If your goal is to make as much money as possible, we might say that the answer is to find the greatest common denominator in terms of audience and go, just paste content for them. I think that we see that, in some of the large studio strategies with what they're doing, pursuing, these long, lasting IP that they want to kind of keep on going and bring people back to the theaters, etc. I think that, if you want to be an artist and you want to stay true to yourself, then 100% make for yourself. As a, founder of products and technology, I think we do have to think about kind of the capitalistic effects of building something for an audience. But famously, if you asked smartphone users back in 2007 what they wanted on their smartphone, they'd say a bigger keyboard. And Steve Jobs was out there saying, we actually need no keyboard. What people want is flexibility. And so when you listen too closely to your audience,
True.
you actually don't always get the answer. I think there's actually a thing to be said about understand your audience better than they know themselves. So it's not just about what they think they want. They might, if you ask people what they want in a Marvel movie, they'll say they want bigger explosions and bigger bad guys, right? But at some point, when you give them the god of all gods in, Marvel movie number 72, it loses its luster. What they're really looking for is actually the challenge and the growth of a character into rising up against something that's worthwhile and interesting and brings them a sense of surprise, right? And so that can be done by creating larger challenges with stronger superheroes. Or we go back down to origin stories and we say, what we really need is go back to these characters that are first starting out and give them reasonable challenges that seem to match them where they are, right? And so I think, as creators, whether it's creatives or, product developers, I think that it's so important that we kind of say it's not just what people are saying, it's the intent behind it that we need to actually pursue if we're trying to get large amounts of buy-in from our audience.
True. And I will add, as you're talking about that, like, luckily, even though I like to write for me, I do care about being entertained. Like I do enjoy an entertaining movie, not a slow shot of like a donkey through like a field in Russia. Like I don't enjoy that, so I'm lucky that like if I write for myself, at worst it's like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Like there will be blood, a little slowness every now and then just for pacing, but I do like to be entertained and I'm sure and it's a conversation also between the bigger budget movies. I'm not the kind of filmmaker who's going to say all Marvel movies should die because they do keep the theaters open, and at least the theaters are open, okay? Because then we can come in and do our little movie also in the 5 p.m. slot or whatever or midnight slot. So I do have respect for that side of it, and but that's an interesting point too made about Steve Jobs and how crazy that must have seemed at the time.
I mean, I think that when you just mentioned, good that Marvel's keeping the theaters open, that's one component here, but I also think diversity matters. Diversity in every sense of the word, but let's talk about content diversity. If all we have is one type of film, if we only ever had just Marvel films, I think there'd be a sense of monotony in culture, a monotony in entertainment that people would really get stuck in. And I think that movies and the conversations we have are such forms of expression that lead to so many conversations that you have to have these juxtapositions of, oh my God, I know it's not the thing you usually watch, but you gotta try this thing. Right? I have all these friends that are like, I know you're into X, but like you can't miss out on Y. And when that happens, you go in and you do it, there is something about the new, right? It's like, people travel around the world because they don't want to just simply be in the same town with the same people all over it. People crave these new experiences. And I think that's genres are a way for us to transport ourselves to new experiences away from kind of our usual patterns, our usual
True.
routines.
A utopia made by a guy or girl with one specific taste won't end up feeling like a utopia. Maybe it'll feel like boring. Like if Rick, who's that guy who's the designer who everything is like cement and leather and rock? He's like that guy.
Rick Owens, I think.
Rick Owens. Like if he was the tastemaker of the world, it'd be like very bleak.
Yeah,
Like your one taste.
it's almost like you can enjoy these things because you're getting doses of it, and you romanticize what it looks like because you like are able to push it away when you want. But if that's what the world looks like, imagine how we
Like
would
if
feel.
everyone lived in Rick Owens' like brutalist house with like
Yeah.
stone floors. I mean, it'd be kind of cool for a little bit, but it'd be a little sad.
So, Mark, I'll ask this to both of you. Mark, I kind of have a sense of your film style. What's a movie that's really out of your normal jurisdiction that you just love? Like something that's just so opposite from your usual stuff that you're like, I couldn't live without this movie. It was transformative in some way. I could see Aiden already thinking about like how he's going to answer.
No, I know. See, the last episode I mentioned Fantastic Mr. Fox, and that's my all-time favorite movie. However, I'm also like there's no other Wes Anderson movie that I think of in that light, and I just like enjoy that so much. But oh God, I feel like there's some better examples that I need to think about for a little
The
bit.
one that comes to mind
For
while he's
me, like,
thinking about it.
yes, again, to preface for the audience, like my style is very darkly comedic, Yorgos and maybe Coen Brothers esque, but like a movie that's out of that realm for me that I couldn't live without and wouldn't be who I am would be two people in all their movies. It'd be Jim Carrey and Adam Sandler. I think like Ace Ventura, just hilarious. I mean, come on, the guy loves animals. and he's insane. I mean, what's better than that? And then yeah, like all those Happy Gilmore movies and like mostly Happy Gilmore, but yeah, the Adam Sandler movie is
Is there a
like
new one coming out this year? Or aren't they going back?
there is a
Because
new one coming
I'm
out.
seeing it in theaters for sure, and I mean
It's
that
coming
movie is
back.
like, yeah, it's our generation's something.
Yeah, it
Yep.
just taught me like you can have fun with the movie too. Like you can go crazy. There's no rules. There's lots of movies like yeah, I don't know. I like to blend those elements, I think, and just have the Happy Gilmore character, but in my movie is like Hippo. Like Hippo's an insane character, but he's in like a dark drama. It doesn't really make sense, but I don't know. I almost like consciously, but then unconsciously, I like to take sort of my best of influences and blend them and see how they do together.
Yeah, so I am terrible with horror. And so I feel like I knew that I was gravitating towards, if there was one movie in horror that I was obsessed with, it would be perfect for this. And I feel like I'm probably leaning towards Midsummer as my pick. One, because like I really didn't enjoy watching the movie, but I was like profoundly into it when I was watching it just because of how uncomfortable it made me feel and the things that I was feeling I just really couldn't get out of any other movie. Not that I would rewatch it for a very long time, which I don't think I would, but it's very outside of my comfort zone and I like appreciated that I took the chance on it because it was really great, but definitely not something that's for
I
sure.
love that one too. And Ari Aster's great. And if
Yeah.
I could add in one more modern one that I'm happy exists, that is sort of in my wheelhouse, is Beau is Afraid, is his next movie.
Yeah.
I'm happy that got made because it's so weird and it got a big budget. And I'm like, and it didn't do well, which says something. But I'm still happy it got made. It means there are risk takers still out there in the business.
He's definitely one of them.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Alex, what about you?
Um, that's a good question. I think my genre I gravitate towards is things that put me at ease and a chuckle, a laugh, and simplicity. I love a good, feel good story. I literally watched Shrek last night, just because, and I love those kind of those feel good movies, with some character depth. And so, I'm actually, something I watched recently, which is very much out of my, it's high stress, high anxiety, which is a series, The Pit. I just watched the first season of The Pit, and I'm not a medical show guy. I'm not up for anxiety. I'm not up for tension. I need to relax when I put the TV on. And I actually think my blood pressure went up about 20 points for a week while I went through this thing. And at some point, I just had to get to the end of the series to know, what happened so I could finally put myself back at ease and go back to my Shrek watching proclivities. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this in the first episode. My favorite movie of all time is Ratatouille. And talk about like a low stress
Yeah.
So
fun
good.
movie. But I will say that there's a part of Ratatouille that I talk about often with founders, and I wonder if the same goes for filmmakers and storytellers, which is there's that central theme of anyone can cook, right? And on its face, it means that anyone can go out and cook a meal and get great at this thing. But it's explained to us later in the film, like this is very, very true. The real message is a cook can come from anywhere. Doesn't matter, in the same way a filmmaker come from anywhere. It doesn't matter if you went to film school or you grew up without the means to do so, or you were, a construction worker who just lived a life and had a story to tell. A cook can come from anywhere. It does not mean that everyone should be a cook or a filmmaker, right? And so I think that's the thing that I find very, very, interesting is that not every career or pursuit or something is meant for everyone. It doesn't mean that there's any reason you couldn't do it, right? But not everyone should be doing it. And so I imagine in film there was this thing we talked about needing to wake up and breathe this thing. Those people should go out and filmmake. They should go out and cook. And so that really sticks with me when I think about product development because a lot of people want to go build an app. They want to go build this and I never discount someone based on their backgrounds, but I'm also a strong believer that not everyone should be those creators. Not everyone should be, out there doing that, because there are people that are made for it than others. Ratatouille is one that's a favorite, and I'm tangenting away from the question, and The Pit is on the opposite end of that spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
Well, from that, I'm very excited to now check out The Pit. I haven't really seen, but I Googled it as soon as you said it, and I'm like, holy shit, it's getting incredible reviews.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch that immediately.
Yeah. It's every episode's 1 hour of a day in the ER, and it's
Whoa.
very, very tense. The storytelling, I'm sure Aiden will get into this more in a couple minutes, but like storytelling is so much what we talk about here at Cassette, right? Which is, without listening to a movie or a series, it's a reminder that it's not what we're seeing that connects us with it. It is the story and the threads and how they, weave together that really draws us in, right? People don't love, a Pixar movie because the colors on the screen. They love a Pixar movie because what it says about society, what it says about the characters, their own growth, etc. And the Pit does just a phenomenal job of in one day showing so deeply into characters' backgrounds, some growth from different characters, but also weaving together moments from earlier hours or later hours that come back and affect the way the day continues to go in a way that you kind of can't expect. And it really does draw you in a way that I haven't been into a show in some time.
It's super cool. I actually love, sort of a side point on that is I love to watch things that feel real, like even documentaries and prison documentaries, but I like to make things that don't feel real. So I think I'll love The Pit. I love stuff that feels real, but then yeah, when it comes to making it, I want to get away from it. Like I would never make The Pit. It'd be like I would pass out actually.
Yeah, for sure. I think I do want to chat a little bit about some principles of cassette and how, Mark, they may resonate with you. And I think we can just start with being audio first and what audio means in the creative process. I think that again, it's just like the types of people who I'm around because, young and I lived in LA and there were a lot of young filmmakers around at the same time. A lot of people place a ton of importance on the visuals and the cinematography, and it drives a lot of the advertising and growth for a movie is what you can see. When it comes to your creative process, how important is audio for you versus visual, and how have you found ways where audio can really assist and even take lead in telling the story of your movies?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think what sets sort of the ones who maybe should, like you said, be the cooks, be the filmmakers, from the ones who maybe shouldn't. And I've seen plenty of people who shouldn't in my career, and a lot of them are people who actually put too much weight on the visuals and don't think about audio. One of the early lessons I learned from from traditional filmmakers and teachers along the way was you can skimp out on the camera quality, you can skimp out on the color grade. You cannot record bad audio, you can't mix bad audio. If your movie sounds good, it will be perceived as high quality. And I think the early mumblecore movies from Mark Duplass proved that. These movies look like shit. Like the lighting's bad, the cameras are like mini DV camcorders. A lot of David Lynch's movies were on DV, which I actually think looks sick, his version of it. But no, so audio and as someone who grew up playing piano as well, I've always had a love for music, rhythm, and audio, an appreciation for that. And so, no, for me, like when I'm filming, like yeah, we want to get the frame right, and I work with my cinematographer, and if he's so his name's William Babcock, he's so particular. If he likes the frame, chances are I love the frame. Okay, so we're good there. I don't have to think about that anymore. Once that's all I'm doing is really listening and looking at the character's eyes and like how far the eyes are from the. That's really it. I'm not focusing too much once we get it, and I'll have my headphones on if I'm far away and just kind of make sure it sounds right. And it's almost like when sometimes I like to think of it like if I was watching someone listen or watching someone watch a movie on their laptop or TV, you kind of sometimes like, what are you watching over there? And you hear it. You're like, wow, that sounds really cool. It's like that's the experience a movie should have, where like the audio, you could be cooking, you could be doing your homework, and you're like listening to a movie from someone else, and you're like, I can't wait to check that out because it sounds so crazy, or like, stop playing it. It's too many spoilers, and it kind of goes into the cassette, but yeah, no, like I definitely I think audio is so important. One story on my last movie was that we just shot in January. We had a scene in a car, and we had the camera mounted inside the car. It was a hearse, and the two characters were driving in the front, and we were about to roll. It looked great, and then the audio guy like taps me on the shoulder. And he's like, by the way, like we don't have any like mics in there. We just have the lav mics, which are less quality. You want to have a boom. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, if we put the mic there, it's going to be like in the shot. And I was told to not do that. And I'm just making sure with you. And I was like, no, like, I don't care if like, we can VFX that out. Like, we need good audio. Like, And the sound guy like was like almost gonna like cry. He was like, "Thank you so much." You're like, the directors never say that. They always like prioritize the shot, and they don't want to VFX out the camera. And I'm like, no, like I'd rather spend, because if we didn't get good audio on that take, it would be 10 grand to get the audio right. Whereas VFXing the mic out would be a couple grand. If you fuck up the audio, like it's really bad. So no, I've learned over time to appreciate it, and it's a growing appreciation still. And working with my sound mixer, composers, all of that, I still think not enough. I still think I wish I had more budget for the sound mix than I usually have.
So walk me through,
But yeah.
Hippo, again, I only listened to it, so I can only speak to the sound in that film. And for those, listening that have not watched or listened to Hippo, there's, quite a bit of dialogue. There is a narrator actually kind of narrating some of the elements and thoughts going inside of the characters' heads, which is a really good medium actually for cassette, just because it gives you so much more rich content as you listen. But when I think of the movie, I also think about kind of the music track behind it was really, really unique. I don't even know what words to use to describe it, operatic or something. I'll ask you, Mark, what is the hierarchy of importance you put on different elements of the audio? Obviously, we can agree clean audio in your actual dialogue recordings, that's a given. But when you think about creating the right layers to it and engaging an audience in that way, what's your philosophy on kind of working through those elements?
Well, again, thank you again for enjoying Hippo on audio. I'm so happy it plays well as a radio play. And yeah, I think that the number one thing is definitely, obviously starts with dialogue. I definitely care a lot about the dialogue because that's sort of the play of it. That's where the emotions are going to be captured. Um, and so as long as, yeah, if you capture that clean, I know my sound mixer is going to be able to like denoise it and do everything you need. But then when it comes to the mix, I'd say the thing I'm second most excited about is the music. I think the music really drives a lot of emotion, either drives it, complements it, or works in contrast with in a way that's meant to be like funny.
I want
And
to go deeper there for a second. You're working
yeah,
on a scene. So right now, what you've got is you've got the dialogue, and it's recorded, and obviously have visuals too. How are you thinking about what to throw in there? How are and when I think of dialogue in a scene, I couldn't tell you what instrument should play. I couldn't tell you how loud it should be. I couldn't tell you any of this. So how do you make those kinds of decisions?
so it's a great question, and I don't know how other filmmakers do it, but for me, I don't think about music at all until we shot the film. Like I might have an idea, like it would be cool to score it in this style, but I have to give that away and focus on capturing the story. And then afterwards, once you start playing with temp music, is what they call it when the editor puts in just some temporary stuff. And that's when the ideas start. Once the scene starts to form, the rest of it can start to come together. Like, what's the music going to look like? What kind of color grade do we want to put on this? What sound ambience or sound design will help heighten the scene? Or and sometimes it's no music. Sometimes you want it clean. And just Spielberg has that movie Munich. There's that very famous scene when they're about to blow up a car or something, and it's like famously no music for like 2 minutes, and it's so gripping. And sometimes that can be the more gripping, but in my case with Hippo, it played more as a comedy, so the music sort of helps with the, like you said, operatic nature. But yeah, I like to I try not to think about that's like the dessert. Like the music for me is like the dessert, and I don't deserve to like to think about it until we're done shooting. And then I can have fun. And then it's like you can only enhance the story is the idea. It can only make the movie better. And then the same thing with the sound design and the ambience and the Foley, all that. I work with a guy named Kenny Kuziak, who's in Brooklyn. He's composed, or he's scored and done sound design for like everything I've ever done. And he'll do his own Foley. He'll take a steak out of his fridge and punch it and slap something down and mix these things together and take a baseball bat, hit it against a tree. And that stuff's really fun. But
I mean,
that's really an
Kenny, and I
yeah,
can confirm that this guy thinks
amazing.
about audio 10 times more before breakfast than any of us will think about it, in a month.
I feel like Foley
That is
artists
awesome.
are some of the most like underappreciated, but like amazing freaking integral parts of the film industry. I don't know if you guys may have ever seen it or saw it online, but there was an exhibit at the Academy of Motion Pictures in LA that was entirely designed around Foley art. And what they did was they like deconstructed the scene of the boulder rolling from Indiana Jones, chasing him down, and
So sick.
they constructed it from start to finish with all of the Foley effects being added one by one. And so there's a
Whoa.
clip on the wall of the Foley artist, like with her hands inside of these shoes, like walking around on a mat, trying to get the effects of him running. There was like this guy drumming on like a pot, and there was some lights like going down. It was like incredible to see how far you can get with just like stuff that you can find around your house and just creating magic with it and just building and building and building
Yeah.
on top of it. And I agree so much with what you said, Mark, about how it's like it's the dessert on top of everything. It's like you're adding and adding just to create this more and more immersive environment to be in.
Speaking of sound effects, one thing we talked about in the first episode were sound effects that really spoke to us, like moments in sound and film historically that really stand out to us. I can't remember exactly how you worded it. Maybe you want to pose that question to Mark, just so we can get his take.
Yeah, I forget how I did pose it. I think it was just like moments in film that for us like really made us appreciate how well sound can be used in movies and how much of a better environment it creates for the audience. If there's anything that really sticks out to you, Mark, about where you were like, wow, this scene would not have survived without the audio that was made around it.
In my own films or just like film history?
In your own
Film
film or
history.
in any that you find as a good too, but in your own film too, it would also be great.
It's a really good question. I think that well, one that comes to mind in my own films is we're working with Kenny on it, and I want to preface that also by saying like any director who takes credit for like the sound effects and music is full of shit. Like I work with talented people. Once I get the story on camera, my editor, I get tons of support. So this is all to say, this is a shout out to the unsung heroes and sound people of the industry. But yeah, like for Pledge, we had a movie about actually it's about frat hazing. I don't know if you ever seen it. I produced it.
Yep.
Based on our API experience, obviously. No, not actually.
We were so tame. We were so tame. Just a bunch
Yeah, we were.
of little Johns Hopkins students in a basement.
Yeah, in hindsight, it was much tamer than it maybe felt in the lived experience. But um, we had a scene where they were eating a bunch of slop that the frat brothers fed them, and I remember the music, the sound of that scene, like, and it would cut away to it being blended, like, and they even put in a live rat, and he'd like slap the rat down, and the cigarettes, and then they pour it into the soup like a soupy grossness. And I remember when I watched that scene first. I always felt like I always worried it was going to come off as like oh, this is just like, how can a scene about like soup be 5 minutes long? Like, this is stupid. Like, and I was the producer and I was questioning it. But then when you added in the sound, when we actually showed it to audiences, people would squirm, and then afterwards there are some people who said they had to leave during it, and I'm thinking like, wow, the power of sound to make you feel that way, because the visuals were only semi kind of doing that, because it was just pea soup. We were just putting in split pea soup. It wasn't actual rat stew, but the sounds Kenny added when he poured it in were just grotesque. I don't know what he did, but it worked.
He actually did find a New York rat, and that was his secret sauce.
Yeah, maybe.
Before we go from history, that reminds me of, I was having a conversation with a sound designer a couple days ago, and talking specifically about horror and how you create a sense of fear and tension, or even jump scare in someone. And they were making the point in the case that, if without visuals, they felt that it was going to be weaker. That if you can't see something that scares you, it is harder to make someone afraid. And I kind of pushed back on that, and I said, I'm not sure I agree. I think that sound, none of these jump scares or even tension are denoted by sound, whether it's a very quick, hit of a sound that occurs, or from, silent to very loud, or it's a rising tension, violin, we all know that high pitched sound. And I pulled back kind of philosophically. I said, I wonder why sound might be more viscerally intense than visuals. And the thing I came to after thinking about it for a little bit was, when we think of a deer in the forest and it hears a predator coming, what's the first thing that happens? Its ears perk up. it often doesn't see the predator. We're actually more in tune as animals to use our hearing first to create a sense of caution and anxiety in our bodies before our sight. And I really fundamentally believe there's something to that about how sound can actually be a larger source of anxiety and fear in us than visuals, and visuals can compound or confirm for us grotesqueness, disgust, the things that we feel uncomfortable with. So I that's something that happened this
That's
week. You guys
fascinating.
be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think
I
I
love
agree.
that.
Um, I think that it also goes like there's a limit on your imagination when you are using your sight. There really isn't that limit on your imagination
Mm,
when you're hearing things.
It's a good
And so
point.
you could hear the scene in the frat basement of the soup being served. And if you hadn't seen the visual that was paired with that, you could think that that's almost anything like even more intensely grotesque.
What did they do to
yeah,
the soup? Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. And I think that's why when I watch a horror movie, I can cover my ears, and it seems things are a lot safer than they are.
You don't cover your eyes, right?
But yeah, no, I can cover my ears, and I think like if you watch a horror movie and you try, it's a lot less scary without audio. But when you're covering your eyes and you don't know what's coming, you really start to imagine the worst when you're in that
Yeah.
situation.
I think you guys are totally on something with that, and yeah, I think evolutionarily there's obviously something there. 'Cause yeah, if you can see it, it's like real, yeah. But if you hear it, it's like what the fuck is that? And and also it's like if you walk by a friend watching a movie, it's like going back to that example before, it's like I feel like you're usually intrigued by the sound of it than like, whoa, what are you watching? That frame looks sick. It's like, no, you want to know, like, what are they saying? Like, have you
Yeah.
heard a funny joke? Like, maybe the sound effects are sick. And it's like, you hear the Batmobile going, whatever it is. And there's something intriguing. So it's why I think also offering up cassette as the dessert, as the main dish is intriguing. You're getting the main, you are getting most of it, if not in theory, the best part of it, which is the thesis which I agree on here, which is to say, also another example there to sort of like show that like your idea is so good as well, and why sound is most important is that I remember somebody told me like maybe it was when my teacher was talking about how important sound was to movies. They were like, you'll torrent a movie. The example was if you torrented a movie, which I don't know, but like when you were a kid or you come across like a free movie on YouTube or whatever, and it had terrible audio, what would you do? You're going to exit out. You're not going to watch that. It could be 480p, terrible audio. But if you come across a P movie with crisp audio, you might actually sit through it and watch this horrible looking movie because it has the right audio track. And that says something. That proves
There's
that
something to it.
there's
Yeah.
something to that sound. And historically, I was trying to think of movies with sound. The one that comes to mind because it's like a musical almost is Whiplash, but it's so
Which
good
scene
visually
gets you?
also.
Yeah. Which scene gets you audibly? Obviously, the music there is incredible, but
You
And
know
then I
what?
love the ending scene, obviously.
Yeah, I was gonna say the ending scene too. Like lacks everything that the whole movie was building up to, which I thought was
Yeah, that scene was it really brought together audio and visual in the best way. Damien Chazelle is one of the few directors who you can clearly say appreciates good audio.
and I think, like, if I'm not mistaken, there really is not much VFX in the final, or sorry, not VFX, sound effects in the final scene other than just the music itself. And I think that final scene, like the final pause on J.K. Simmons' face, it's like completely silent. And I think it's like really, I mean, the movie's meant to be loud. It's meant to be building up all of this like musical intensity up into this final scene. And it's like you finally get this moment of bliss almost after like such intense
cacophony is what I call it. It's
yeah,
like a
exactly.
cacophonous
Yeah,
thing, for scenes and scenes, and then finally it's down, right?
yeah, I love it. I think it's such an interesting way to play on audio as well because we're talking all about like how can you build up and up and up the audio. Damien Chazelle takes it and is like, okay, the most powerful thing I can do with audio now is cut it completely. And I
It's
think
a
that's
great setup to one of the most effective punchlines in movie history.
definitely it's pretty great. Yeah, so speaking of like what's on cassette and streaming in general, I wanted to go into where you kind of see the direction of the entertainment and film industry with the rise of streaming. I mean, streaming's been risen, but some of these alternative methods of consumption of movies and entertainment. How do you see filmmakers adapt to be successful in that era? Do you think it's like detrimental to the art of filmmaking? Do you think that the theater model is what filmmaking is meant for? What's your kind of thoughts on all of that?
I'm very much of the mind of like, I love theaters, but I'm new school enough to say like whatever means necessary to get my work seen. If I would not turn down a movie deal with straight to Netflix if they didn't put it in theaters, like, probably Martin Scorsese would, or people of that caliber and fame. I think that, the home cinema is becoming better and better. I think VR and all these experiences and ways to consume media, I hope they get better and better. And I have no problem with streaming being like being sort of the new normal, and theater being like a special experience. With that said, where streaming is failing us indie filmmakers right now is, going back a little bit to what I was talking about before, is they don't usually buy our movies unless they're like, some massive perfect commercial thing that they like, it's exactly the thing that could make $100 million. Like early on Netflix used to actually they'd pick up a lot of movies out of festivals, for $1 million, $500,000, and also more through these middlemen deals with the distributors. And now it's hard. Like, they're only what they call low budget. They have like a low budget division, and it's like 20 million. It's like 20 million is their like low budget, and they also like to get in early and produce it. So the acquisition, the direct acquisition, is increasingly rare, and I think that's really sad because there are a lot. It's it's sad just because there are a lot of good movies like Hippo, I like to think, being in that class of like good overlooked movies that don't get that streaming platform or that ability to have a mass audience because the buyers have deemed it, for whatever reason, not lucrative to attracting their subscribers, or however it is, it doesn't fit into their business model anymore. So it's not killing, but it's threatening to kill the lower budget film, because it's not anymore if you build it, they will come. It's if you build it, chances are you're going to have to self distribute it yourself or go viral on TikTok. And there needs to be, I don't know what the answer is, but and maybe it's cassette. Like, there needs to be a middle ground answer to ways of getting those indies out there.
Well, I think so. It's great that you talk about indies and kind of their place in streaming. One thing, at a higher level on, AAA content is consumers are saying, "Hey, I enjoyed watching Title X on Netflix. Why is it leaving Netflix? Why is it now on? Why do I have to go get a Paramount Plus account to go do that and then hop over to Hulu a couple months later?" And I think, you have to realize that the studios are incentivized to constantly switch content out that is going to draw eyes, because that's how they turn on subscribers. And you have come and subscribe to that content you love. You now get an account on there. You watch through it, but you keep that account, for a while. Either you forget to unsubscribe, or you find and explore other content that keeps you there. And so them swapping out content to the newest AAA titles that people are familiar with is the best way for them to make money. Now, if we try and make that same equation work with indie, you have to build up so much larger advertising budgets to educate the consumer on what this title is and why they might want to watch it, and build the social proof their platform is the place to be. And so indie films in the traditional stream model, I think, will only ever be a retention capability than it is a user acquisition capability. And I think that it's really dependent on how they kind of lay out and drive their consumers to indie. Maybe the answer is that streaming services should think more about how do they make their you watched X, so we think you'll like Y, point people to stuff that is maybe a little more off the beaten path, versus I feel like the same 50 comedies pop up for me no matter what when I look at,
Right.
to watch. So maybe that's a component to it, or maybe it is that, like, what Crunchyroll has done for anime needs to
Mm.
happen for indie films somewhere else. Again, it really does come down to how do you get a consumer really engaged with something when they don't even know what they're signing up for because they haven't heard of this movie. There's only a couple reviews. How do they decide to give you, Mark Rapaport, the 2 hours real estate in their evening when they don't know who you are, what your movie is, etc.?
It's a really good point. And similar to your points on AI, like some of these are hard truths that filmmakers don't like to think about, and I'm
Totally.
trying to think about them enough, but not too much that I lose all drive and I understand that the economy is working against me. But I do still believe if you build it, they will come. And I think what you said with curation. Well, for me, for Hippo, we sort of had a semi version of that, and being curated by Rough House Pictures, who came on as executive producers. These guys, Danny McBride, David Gordon Green, Jody Hill, like big names in the comedy world, put their name on it, but it's like, and a lot of people will get their indie like executive produced by Steven Soderbergh. Like, no, this will happen, but then there's no like next step really. Like, I feel like Netflix needs like a section
Mhm.
like filmmaker picks. You know, like Sean Baker will always
Mm.
watch movies on Letterboxd, and then if he watches it and logs it, it might not have many views. I'm still waiting for him to watch Hippo. He has our Blu-ray. He says he bought it. So if he watches Hippo, like 1,000 people will add to their thing. So I don't know if there's a way that somehow they can monetize their taste making or what have you, but right now, actually, the best thing for indies, I do want to shout it out, is Letterboxd. It's the Letterboxd app. It's where people have discovered Hippo. It's where people add it to their watch list. It was this New Zealand startup that was purchased by some other private equity company, and it's like the IMDb it's like the
Everything.
Instagram of IMDb. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a social IMDb where you can follow friends. It's great. I don't know if you have it, but I would highly
Yeah.
recommend it.
I have it
Yeah,
too.
okay. You guys know it, so it's great. So it's hit some level of mainstream, hopefully mainstream visibility at this point. And I don't know if there's some way they do a thing where you can not say you guys are like mainstream at all. Like you're definitely niche, entrepreneurs in your own right in terms of having good taste. Sorry, I'm very careful not to call people mainstream because that's like my biggest fear is like being called like mainstream. But no, you can click on Hippo there and it'll say where to watch. Now we're on VOD, like it'll show. So those are all great things. Like Letterbox, if they had a streaming service, like I'd pay $5.99 to watch like thousands. So maybe they're the ones who are going to save the world. I was hoping Mubi was going to save the world, but they've chosen to only license like really boring French movies or like really pretentious ones.
Yeah.
That's right, CEO of Mubi, if you're listening. He will be soon.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys are like becoming like I feel like the vibe is like you're the all-in podcast of specifically media. Like specifically like I think that's cool. I think these conversations are unexpected and really fun. But yeah, like um and really and I'm learning a lot just talking to you guys about it. But yeah, all it is to say is there's hope yet. I'm not yeah, we're still out there
I'll throw
trying to
one
make
thing into
it
the
trying to make it
mix because
happen.
I know we're getting out of time here, but I think you have one more question. But just on that thought, it is interesting when you think of content on a spectrum between AAA theatrical and person with their iPhone posting to TikTok. It is interesting that at both ends of the spectrum you have immense value. You have immense, ability to reach mass audiences and to generate money, right? I mean, Mr. Beast over here, I know that now his stuff is kind of more AAA because he's spending millions of dollars in production, but like, a bunch of TikTok creators are making millions of dollars, and the studios are making millions of dollars. And somehow in the middle, when it comes to, indie creators making high quality stuff at a lower cost, that's longer form, there's some like dilution that happens or some kind of lack of awareness or visibility into these things that I think is really interesting question. And we won't solve it here on the pod, but
Mm.
I just wanted to call that out in the way that my mind kind of starts to turn on. How do you get people to get into that middle space? But Aiden, you got more stuff you want to chat us through.
Well, no,
That's a really good question.
I actually had a theory, and I think it might just have to do with people's retention and their investment. It's a lot easier to invest 60 seconds into a TikTok video of someone that you don't know rather than 2 hours of a piece of work or a piece of content of somebody that you don't know. And so I feel like there's a spectrum of investment of your time versus trust, and bridging that gap for indie creators, figuring out how we can play the line and build trust is kind of the key problem that a lot of streamers or a lot of folks who are wanting to support indie creators, it's the issue that they face. But yeah, no, I think last thing I just wanted to ask again, Mark, to go over and do a little overview of Hippo, also where all the folks who are listening can find you, and just kind of like
Thank you.
a little plug section for you.
Amazing. Quickly before that, just one more thought on what you guys were just talking about. If that's cool.
Yeah.
on like finding that middle ground and being smart about where the eyeballs are going. I've learned a lot also on YouTube watching a guy named Jack Conte who founded Patreon. He has a channel called Digital Spaghetti where he talks about like creative content makers who actually make like high quality things. And I'm finding that like they're getting more eyeballs making not movies than I'm getting making movies. And I'm trying to now put a part of my time and energy into making stuff for YouTube, largely influenced by sort of what you're talking about. I don't know if I'd go so low as to do TikTok, like 60-second videos, but like YouTube for now, I can like stomach.
Have you thought about about turning a feature length film into something that's episodic? Something
Yeah.
that is, these 5-10 minute segments.
Well, we did a TikTok ad for an Instagram ad. We made a reel of our trailer that did really well and got to those people, but I haven't thought about directly doing that to the movie.
Because
But
we've
I've
thought about
done
doing this with
clips.
cassettes. We've thought about doing this
Yeah,
with cassettes, especially ones that we're producing. What does it look like to actually have these in 5-10 minute bite-sized chunks that someone knows they can commit to, first episode or something. And it really is just the same content, but just intelligently kind of cut at each spot, similar to what they would do with commercial cuts, back in the day when we were watching, TV in the 1990s. And it's like they always stopped at the moment that you knew you had to come back for in 8 minutes
yeah.
after all the commercials. Obviously, minus the ads, unless it's an ad-supported platform. But just a thought. It's one that crosses my mind often.
I do like that if that's the intention going into the creation. Whereas retroactively doing that, I think you'll end up cutting corners. But doing it going into it, yeah. Like if I hope to get good enough at YouTube to like make some shorts, basically. Yeah.
But Hippo,
Uh,
let's
but yeah,
get it.
Hippo. So yeah, no, thank you guys. Hippo. So should I give the log line again? And
Yeah,
then
do
I'll
it.
give
Give
a
us, give
more.
us, give us the whole background. So, what is Hippo? Just the storyline. A lot of the listeners aren't familiar. This is a great place to tell them about it, and then also where they can.
So Hippo is a dark comedy coming of age film about two step siblings. I'll say it's without spoiling it, it's equal parts maybe horrific and hilarious and strange and
Off-putting.
unsettling,
Yeah.
off-putting. I've been told. Yeah, these are all things people have described it as. I'm not categorizing my own film, but yeah, I'd say it's like anyone who's ever felt awkward as a teenager growing up will find something in this film. Whether you're a boy or a girl, whether you had brothers or sisters, you will find something. Or you're a parent, I think it's definitely, as it's proven to be, a bit of a riot and a bit of a bit of a crazy watch in hopefully the best of ways. So that's my feature directorial debut that came out. We did a little theatrical run back in November of 2024, and now it's finally on VOD everywhere and Blu-ray. We even did a VHS, by the way. Speaking of physical media sort of influences, and that's because the movie's based in the 90s and the character's addicted. The main character Hippo is addicted to video games. He's a bit of like an edge lord, and his sister is like a really nice girl, and like they definitely don't get along like
Yeah.
how you would want. So but yeah, that's Hippo, and again to plug it, Rough House Pictures are on. Danny McBride, David Gordon Green, Jody Hill are all our executive producers. The brilliant comedic trio known for, among other things, The Righteous Gemstones. Actually, Kimball, who's the lead of Hippo, who plays Hippo, he appeared in the first episode of The Righteous Gemstones through
But
this relationship. Yeah, he appears. He's the soldier that Bradley Cooper. Can I give a spoiler alert? He's the soldier Bradley Cooper kills in the first episode. And so, yeah, that was a very exciting thing that happened out of Hippo. And
where can people watch it?
yeah, so it's on Apple TV, Amazon Prime as for rent or for purchase, and it's also on Fandango at Home and Google Play and YouTube Movies. Pretty much all your major
VOD.
TVOD platforms. Yeah, and then we're gonna try to get it on SVOD or AVOD. We're hoping for Tubi this summer. We'll see.
Cool. Amazing.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. Best of luck with the like all of the release and everything that's going on in your life now that
Thank you guys.
that's out. Alex, anything you want to say to wrap up as well?
No, I mean, Mark, great to have you on and chat about this. It was really, really cool to watch your career kind of continue through those early movies you were a producer on, then finally to listen to Hippo, and now to also, bring Hippo to a new medium through audio. Mark and I are currently working on just a couple of small adaptations to make it ready for full audio listening. And we're going to put it up on a couple of different audio platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts for people to come give a shout to and listen to. So we'll see what people feel about, all the audio work that Mark won't take credit for, but we will give credit to all the he worked with. So thanks for joining us, man. It's great to see you in chat.
Thank you guys, and again, I really appreciate you both. I think you're building something super cool, and it's doing a lot of good for the filmmaking. It has potential to do a lot of good, and is already doing for the filmmaking industry and for indie filmmakers like myself, who it's all about finding platforms, and to me, this is a clear one that should exist. So, best of luck with the rollout as you continue, and thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.